Cyber attacks as a weapon of real war. According to the Wall Street Journal, the Pentagon has a plan now to respond against attackers and hackers, treating cyber attacks as acts of war. That means real physical retribution for attacks on critical computer systems, bombs for bits, so to speak. So where are the threats coming from? Here are the list of numbers. Take a look. 12% of the attacks traffic comes from Russia, followed by Taiwan, Brazil, China, and the United States. Those are the latest numbers. Now, to be clear, not all those attacks are aimed at the U.S. Russia and China routinely trade cyber threats. Even Iran's nuclear grid fell victims to a virus.
But why is it that with all our American know-how and all our technology and all the seriousness that most people are now taking this issue, do we just have to throw up our hands and say we just can't protect this stuff? That doesn't seem right.
I think you absolutely can protect against this stuff. The problem is it's expensive and it's sophisticated. I mean, and the other problem is you don't know where it's coming from. Look at the Stuxnet worm, which was the one that infected the Iranian centrifuges and the computers there. Nobody knows who did it.
The virus is called Stuxnet, and according to the Financial Times, it may be aimed at Iran's controversial nuclear facility.
And it is theoretically possible that the U.S. government did this. More likely, frankly, is Israel, that Israel did it. It's not impossible that some group of hackers did it, but the security experts that are studying this really think this required the resources of a nation state.
With respect to the recent announcement by Google, we are obviously very concerned about Google's announcement regarding a campaign that the company believes originated in China to collect the passwords of Google email account holders.
In response to these attacks, which Google claims, and I stress that because there's no independent confirmation of any of this, Google claims that China hacked Google. But let's just look at two important things. Who founded Google? How did Google get this tremendous supremacy starting in the late 90s? Well, it turns out that there's a CIA proprietary nonprofit company called In-Q-Tel. And In-Q-Tel, created back in 1999 or so under Norman Augustine, he's a famous industrial military complex entrepreneur. Their goal was to invest in the most advanced IT and cyber companies so that the U.S. intelligence community would always be at the forefront. Did they invest in Google? We know they did at least at one point. CIA created Project Keyhole, the satellite imaging of the surface of the Earth. Project Keyhole was sold to Google, and it became Google Earth. And that's what you can see online. And this was a couple of $1 million of startup capital from In-Q-Tel.
About Google's announcement regarding a campaign that the company believes originated in China to collect the passwords of Google email account holders. Google informed the State Department of this situation yesterday in advance of its public announcement. These allegations are very serious. We take them seriously. We're looking into them. And because this will be an ongoing investigation, I would refer you to first Google for any details that they are able to share at this time, and to the FBI, which will be conducting the investigation.
Now, we can make a list of who might have done it, who had the capability of doing it. It probably was a country, not an individual. It was probably one of 3 countries. Probably was several countries and their intelligence services in cahoots with each other.
A virus that was introduced into Iran's nuclear program. There is increasing evidence that it was developed in Israel with the help of Israeli and American engineers.
State-of-the-art computer worm known as Stuxnet that infected operating systems and equipment in Iran earlier this year was likely a state-sponsored cyber attack aimed at destroying the country's nuclear program. The worm was designed to rapidly speed up the rotation of centrifuges used to enrich uranium, causing them to blow apart. And clues found in the coding of the virus point to Israel.
And thus it is estimated that Iran has already lost about 1,000 of its centrifuges.
The hijackers, Google reveals, are in China, right here.
This is the Shandong Lanxiang Vocational School. Most of the graduates become chefs, welders, and mechanics. That doesn't sound very sophisticated, but we know that the military has close ties to the campus.
A Chinese vocational school blamed for staging cyber attacks on Google and other firms says the allegations are funny and unfounded.
The report that we cooperate with the military is funny and is unfounded.
Lan Xiang told China News that some of its graduates have joined the military. Since 2006, the school says 38 students have been recruited by the military for talent in areas like auto repair, cooking, and electric welding. But the school says it is natural for some graduates to join the military.
Another class of students are set to graduate this month from the Center for Cyberspace Research at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. The center is part of the Air Force Institute of Technology at Wright-Patterson. Students at the center conduct postgraduate research and also learn to use the latest high-tech tools for another kind of warfare in the world of computer networks, or cyberspace. The coursework and cyber wargaming exercises are designed to tackle real-world security issues. Educators here are preparing warfighters to handle the many threats they could face in cyber warfare.
We have these students who are coming out of the operational environments. We have students who are civilians that have security clearances coming in and being able to do that type of work.
Jim Lewis is a director at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, and he led a group that prepared a major report on cybersecurity for President Obama.
In 2007, we probably had our electronic Pearl Harbor. It was an espionage Pearl Harbor. Some unknown foreign power, and honestly, we don't know who it is, broke into the Department of Defense, to the Department of State, the Department of Commerce, probably the Department of Energy, probably NASA. They broke into all of the high-tech agencies, all of the military agencies, and downloaded terabytes of information.
But since then, there has been an even more serious breach of computer security, which Lewis called the most significant incident ever publicly acknowledged by the Pentagon. Last November, someone was able to get past the firewalls and encryption devices of one of the most sensitive U.S. military computer systems and stay inside for several days.
This was the CENTCOM network, the command that's fighting our two wars. And some foreign power was able to get into their networks and sit there and see everything they did.
What do you mean, sit there?
They could see what the traffic was, they could read documents, they could interfere with things. It was like they were part of the American military command. The British government has warned its businessmen about Chinese hacking. The Canadian government said that China hacked into its two leading economic agencies. The Korean government said China hacked into its Ministry of Defense to get information on weapons it was buying from the U.S. And the Indians say the Chinese have hacked into every government agency in India.
But there are no fingerprints on this stuff. So then how do you potentially attack somebody? You're going to go to war with Israel because maybe you think they might have done it?
And I wouldn't say I think that Israel did it. I'd say it's more likely that the U.S. did it. This is almost impossible to figure out. The forensics of tracing this back, trying to determine who launches these things originally, is extremely difficult. So this is really pure conjecture on who did it. I do know something, though, about how the U.S. government makes its decisions on whether to launch what we call an offensive information warfare attack, which this would be. Okay. And the bar is quite high.
These allegations are very serious. We take them seriously. We're looking into them. Because this will be an ongoing investigation, I would refer you to first Google for any details that they are able to share at this time, and to the FBI, which will be conducting the investigation.
Google is an arm of the U.S. government. Google is cohabiting publicly with the National Security Agency. So this is essentially a U.S. government attack on China in the sense of these censorship laws that they have, the filtering or the great cyber wall of China. Well, this is, of course, a policy of confrontation with China, which is now opening up a cyber warfare theater, which I think is absolute folly.
What about the U.S. role? Do you think the United States was involved in this?
I don't. The Israelis could do this on their own. I'm sure that this administration was supportive of this attack. I mean, it's better than going to war with Iran. And the Israelis aren't admitting it. They need plausible deniability. For the Iranians, they want to remain a mysterious force. And I think it was actually a brilliant operation, absolutely brilliant.
We have looked at offensive and defensive capabilities for our military infrastructure. So, for example, we set up a cyber command at the end of the Bush administration, early Obama administration, but its job is to create the ability for America to have cyber attacks on another country,
Welcome to the National Security Agency, Central Security Service. I'm General Keith Alexander, Commander of U.S. Cyber Command, Director of the National Security Agency, and Chief of its military components, the Central Security Service. I've been the Director here for more than 5 years, and I can tell you this is an amazing place to work.
But is Iran really running its nuclear power, its nuclear plant on Windows software?
Well, yeah, the main power plant there uses Windows PCs with a Siemens-provided industrial control software package, and that in the diagnostics is how this virus got into it. And that's an increasingly common configuration.
It also seems of increasing concern because, I don't know, I've used Windows, I know other people who have, and it's not stable even without a virus sometimes. So, I mean, should a nuclear system really be hinged on that kind of software?
Well, that is the nature of the modern economy and our technology. We rely heavily on these IT systems. In this case, the virus exploited 4 vulnerabilities that the Windows manufacturers did not know about. 2 of them have now been closed, but there's 2 that they're still working on and then are going to close soon.
The U.S. National Security Agency has offered to work with Microsoft on the development of their Windows software, but it comes amid claims the NSA could track users and intercept their communications.
Well, it's really nothing new. We've seen deals made between the National Security Agency and Microsoft in the past. As a matter of fact, for a number of years, there has been a Microsoft liaison office at the National Security Agency to serve this cooperation that goes on. We're talking about Windows 7 now, but back when Windows 95 came out and Windows NT, there was a lot of talk that there was an NSA backdoor for the use of cryptography to encrypt things like email, for example, in what's known as a cryptographic application program interface. Now, NSA and Microsoft denied there was anything involved with either Windows 95 or Windows NT and this backdoor, except when somebody looked at the code written by the Microsoft programmer, lo and behold, that program interface was called NSA Key. Microsoft tried to explain it and said, well, that was because we intended to use it for an NSA application. Well, they basically admitted that kind of negotiation and whatnot was going on. But it's nothing new that we're hearing information about deals being made to allow NSA an easier time at reading email and tracking people's surfing habits on the Internet.
But Song Xiaojun says the threats the U.S. faces may be intentionally exaggerated.
It is the U.S. that dominates the Internet with an absolute advantage over other nations. When it comes to hardware, the U.S. maintains world-leading technologies in the development of high-speed computer chips. As for software, even the language to write a program is based on U.S. standards, and almost all the root servers in the world are located in the U.S.
How much of this are we doing? We, meaning the United States.
We're in the top of the league, you know. We're as good as anyone.
So whatever foreign countries are doing to the United States is doing to them.
We are in the top of the league. We are really good. And if you talk to the Russians or the Chinese, they say, how can you complain about us when you do exactly the same thing?
I mean, do you think that enforcement like this might leave the U.S. open to physical attacks from other nations who may claim cyber attacks are coming from here?
Yeah, it's kind of ironic that this policy is being announced now. Just the other day, Deputy Defense Secretary William Lynn, when asked whether the U.S. was behind Stuxnet, that's the worm that hit the Iranian nuclear facilities, he sort of gave a non-answer. But if the U.S. was behind it, according to this policy, we would open ourselves up to physical retribution.
On that subject of state sponsorship, today's New York Times reports that in recent weeks, officials from Israel have broken into wide smiles when asked whether Israel was behind the attack or knew who was.
Why does that matter to us? Because we are the single most vulnerable country country because everything we do is on computers, on the internet, on email.
We are in the top of the league. We are really good. And if you talk to the Russians or the Chinese, they say, how can you complain about us when you do exactly the same thing? It's a fair point with one exception. We have more to steal. We have more to lose. We're the place that depends on the internet. We've done the most to take advantage of it. We're the ones who've woven it into our economy and to our national security in ways that they haven't. So we are more vulnerable.